Reading from the Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam, the second canto, chapter 1, entitled The First Step in God Realization. And today we are taking a look at text number 27 and 28. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading text 27 and then we can chant text 28 together. Dve januni sutalam vishvamurte uru dvayam vitalam cha mahitalam tat jaganam mahipate Pastalam na visaro grinanti. The knees of the universal form are the planetary system of the name Sutala, and the two thighs are the Vitala and Atala planetary systems. The hips are Mahitala, and outer space is the depression of his navel. Urustalam Jyotiranikammasya. Urastalam Jyotiranikammasya. Griva Maharvadanam Vaijanosya. Griva Maharvadanam Vaijanosya. Tapovaratim Viduradi Pungsa. Tapovaratim Viduradi Pungsa. Satyam Tashirshani Sahasra Shirshna. Satyam tu Shirshani Sahasra Shirshnaha. Urustalam Jyotiranikammasya. Griva Maharvadanam Vaijanosya. Tapo Varatim Viduradi Pumsa. Satyam tu Shirshani Sahasra Shirshnaha. Urustalam Jyotiranikammasya. Urustalam Jyotiranikammasya. Urastalam Jyotiranikammasya. Ura, high. Sthalam, place, the chest. Jyoti Anikam, the luminary planets. Asya, of him. Griva, the neck. Maha, the planetary systems above the luminaries. Vadanam, mouth. Vai, exactly. Jana, the planetary system above Mahar. Asya, of him. Tapa, the planetary system above the Janas. Varatim, forehead. Vidu is known. Adi, the original. Pumsa, personality. Satyam, the topmost planetary system. Tu, but. Shirshani, the head. Sahasra, 1,000. Shirshnaha, one with heads. Translation. The chest of the original personality of the gigantic form is the luminary planetary systems. His neck is the Mahar planets. His mouth is the Janas planets, and his forehead is the Tapas planetary system. The topmost planetary system, known as Satyaloka, is the head of he who has 1,000 heads. The effulgent luminary planets like the sun and the moon are situated almost in the mid-place of the universe. and as such they are known to be as the chest of the original gigantic form of the Lord. And above the luminary planets, called also the heavenly places of the universal direct Torah demigods, are the Mahar, Janas and Tapas planetary systems. And above all, the Satyaloka planetary system, where the chief directors of the modes of material nature reside, namely Vishnu, Brahma and Shiva. This Vishnu is known as the Kshirodakashaya Vishnu, and he acts as a supersoul in every living being. There are innumerable universes floating on the causal ocean, and in each of them, the representation of the Virat form of the Lord is there along with innumerable suns, moons, heavenly demigods, Brahmas, Vishnus and Shivas, all of them situated in one part of the inconceivable potency of Lord Krishna, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita 10:42. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyalanjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaguna Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahaguna Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitangscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavanishware Vrishabhanu Sudadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. The chest of the original personality of the gigantic form is the luminary planetary systems. His neck is the Mahar planets, his mouth is the Janas planets, and his forehead is the Tapas planetary system. The topmost planetary system, known as Satyaloka, is the head of he who has 1,000 heads. Towards the end of this second canto of the Bhagavatam, we will see a fascinating encounter between Lord Brahma and Krishna, just before Lord Brahma created the universe, or rather, as we say, designed the universe. So Lord Brahma is, in one sense, as they say, the secondary creator, because he doesn't really create anything. Everything was already in existence. And then when he enters into the universe, he just simply puts it in different places. But it's an interesting thing with the material universe, how much can change just by putting things in the right place. And it's amazing. You can walk into a room, we have our interior designers here, and in one sense, they're not creating anything. But just by putting the furniture in the right place and just reshaping it, such a big change happens by just organizing things. So a lot of the creation, actually all of the creation in the material world is actually that. No one is really the creator. No one is really creative. We are just organizing things, putting things in the proper place. But how exactly, why is it that one thing works better than something else? Why is it that one arrangement somehow has a better result? Why is it that just by putting things in different places, that such a different experience or atmosphere is created? So therefore we see then Lord Brahma, he is the most intelligent person, because it's not simple to understand where things are supposed to go. Not simple at all. And if you put the wrong person in charge of organizing things, then there is difficulty. Because that's what intelligence is meant for. Prabhupada explains that intelligence is meant to put things in their proper perspective, to understand where things are supposed to go. And whatever you are, wherever you are in terms of whatever occupation you do, that's basically what everybody is doing, but just on a different scale. The blacksmith, he is having to understand how exactly to fit that pieces of metal together to do what he needs to do. And then the CEO of a company, he's sitting somewhere in some big office on the top floor, but he's doing the same thing in essence. He's also just trying to organize things, so putting things in the right place, but maybe working with a different kind of medium. But then we see that so most people, they are fascinated, caught up in a specific area, their field of experience. They know one thing and that's what they think about and that's what they understand. But we understand that the first step in God realization is to understand that if you look at the world as a whole, it is simply a reflection. It is built according to Krishna's form. And in actual fact, Krishna's form is the blueprint or the basis upon which everything is created. Everything is created according to that principle of Krishna's form and personality. Because when Lord Brahma entered into this world, it was chaos. So that's the thing with the material energy, is that sometimes it becomes disorganized. This becomes chaotic. We all know chaos. We've all experienced it. So sometimes the world, when Lord Brahma entered into this world, it was completely disorganized. There was no form, there was no shape, nothing was here. It was just dark. It was complete darkness. And he was sitting on the top of that lotus flower. But the darkness was not just around him, it was also within him. Because he couldn't understand what was happening. Just like a child that is born, you put a child here. It takes a few months before a child can start to understand what is happening. In the beginning, it's just colors. It's just shapes, colors, sounds. He cannot even distinguish between different objects. Like now, we are used to it. I know that you are, for example, I can judge depth. I can judge that you're about 3 meters away from me, 4 meters away from me. But a child cannot do it because he doesn't have that ability. So in the beginning, ignorance is not just outside, but it's also within us. So therefore, Lord Brahma, when he took birth, he appeared. He had no idea what was happening. But then he performed his meditation after he got that instruction to understand that tapa, by some austerity, it is possible. You have to perform your austerity. And then the Lord appeared to him. Lord Krishna appeared to him. And when he got the darshan of the Lord's form, the feature, then he understood. This is the blueprint. This is how everything is created according to this blueprint. And then the Lord showed him also the spiritual world, what is happening there. And then Lord Brahma started to create. He started his best to then assemble the material universe according to the structure. And therefore we see that the world, the Virat Rupa, is there. Because Lord Brahma, he created the world and he organized everything according to the same structure as he saw when he had darshan of Krishna. But we see that the form of Krishna is everywhere. If you would go in any of the Vedic sciences, you will see that personality is the basis of everything. If you would look at traditional temples in India, for example, very interesting if you look at temple design, sacred architecture as they call it. Nowadays we just fling stuff together, or we do these strange things, and it's a lot about the materials and the lighting and these things, and that's sort of what the main focus is on. But if you look at sacred architecture, a lot of it was about geometry and patterns. To understand that somehow or other, you want to reflect Krishna within whatever it is that you create. So if you would look at the old temples, if you would look at some of the very old temples, like what's that famous temple, like Angkor Wat, or these very ancient Vedic temples, then you would see that it was designed according to the form of the Lord, as if it is a person sleeping. So at the bottom, there is the feet of the Lord. So then you would have the big gates, which are signifying the Lord's feet, because that's where you enter into. You start your meditation on the Lord's feet. And then you would enter into the temple courtyard, and then there's the various parts of the Lord, and then you would proceed from the bottom up until you come to the sacred part, which is the top part and the head of the Lord. So the whole temple design would be a reflection of the form of the Lord. Some very nice pictures if you see how they show that shape of architecture. And even if you study Vastu, then you will see, even if you are in a room, then there's something called the Vastu Purusha. So basically, if you would take a room like this, then you would divide it up. And therefore, it's a picture, it's quite an interesting picture of a man, of a person squatting in a building, having this square shape, with his head in a certain corner, his feet in another corner. And then if you design your building, then you put things in a certain place. You put everything in a specific place, according to the shape of the Lord that is within everything. So it is very amazing, the science that we have of the form of the Lord. And this is then this principle that everything is a reflection of Krishna, reflected in our meditation on the world itself, to understand that the whole cosmos, everything, is simply a reflection of this form of Krishna. To be able to understand that because when things become chaotic, when do things become chaotic? When things are happening and you don't understand why it's happening. It's happening and you're thinking that now something has gone wrong. Something is happening now, but it's not supposed to it's not supposed to be like this. And then we become very confused. And if we do not understand, if we look at something and we don't understand it in its proper perspective, then that is when we start experiencing material emotions. Either fear or anger, because I don't understand it, so I either want to run away from it or I want to kill it. Or we start to experience lust, lust is also just a misplaced material emotion. So you look at something and you don't understand that it's not your property and that it has a higher purpose than your sense enjoyment, and therefore you start to experience lust because you're not understanding it in its proper perspective. So therefore, the first step in God realization is then to understand how everything is still part of Krishna's energy, and this meditation, to see the whole universe, see it all structured out. It's not just the universe, it means everything then should be understood to be simply a reflection of Krishna's form. If we think about the Varnashram Dharma system, it is the same. It is the same. The Shudras are the feet of the Lord. The Vaishyas are the stomach of the Lord. The Kshatriyas are his arms and the Brahmanas are his head. So again, it's the Lord's form that is reflected even into society, into social organization. So, and everything then is understood to have its proper perspective and its place. And whenever the material energy is out of organization, that is how we bring it back into its proper perspective, by seeing it connected to Krishna. And in that way, everything runs its proper course. But the material energy, it is by nature meant, as they call it, the force of entropy. It means that it will tend towards disintegration. It requires a lot of energy to keep things going, to keep things organized. That is unfortunately the nature of the material world. So not so simple, but at least if one knows that everything has its place, that's a good place to start. And if we make our vision big enough, then that is how we become free from material emotions. Because if you look at the world, if you look at one specific part, then it becomes a little chaotic, and yes, it's true, there's some issues. But if we zoom out and we see the world in its great perspective, then we see that yes, ultimately, everything is part of the Lord's greater plan. So therefore this meditation in the Virat is important. Ultimately it is meant for those who are unable to think of Krishna as a person. Therefore we see that's the first step in God realization. It's supposed to bring one to the point of thinking, well, if the universe is a reflection of a person, who is that ultimate person himself? So therefore it also brings us towards understanding Krishna. And for us as devotees who already accept the existence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we then have already understand that behind the universe, yes, it's not just that the universe is one person. Krishna himself is behind it. There's a person we can connect to. And it's fascinating that Prabhupada explains here how all the different, there's innumerable universes. So it's amazing how people sometimes there's this people who worship the universe, and they have this idea that yes, there's the universe, and the universe will help me, and I have to be one with the universe, and it's all about the universe. But it's fascinating that what they don't understand, there's so many universes. Which universe are you speaking about? So there's actually unlimited universes, and all of these universes are again the same, even though there is differences between them. Not that all universes are the same. Some universes have more dimensions than others, for example. So here we have 3 dimensions, or 4 if you count time also as a dimension. But it is explained that there are other universes with more. You can have a universe with 12 dimensions. How would that look? We don't really know, because our senses are not made for that. But mathematically, they work with that. If you get into high abstract mathematics, then you can work with more dimensions. You can have mathematics that work with 12 dimensions or 11 dimensions. So it's definitely possible. But in all these universes, the same principle is there, that it is simply constructed according to the form of Lord Krishna. Now here we see described the higher planets, or it starts with the knees of the Lord and you go up, there's these different planets. So therefore we can also understand that people are placed in different planetary systems according to the level of their consciousness, according to their bigger scheme of things, so how they fit into the bigger scheme of things. So here we see the higher planets are described, Janas, Tapas, and Satyaloka. And these planets are only preserved for those individuals who have conquered over lust. Because if we look at the human body, then we would see For example, the chakra system. You all know the chakras. So many people speak about the chakras and how exactly the chakras work. But the chakras are very interesting because it basically explains that there's different parts of the body that are, you could say, different energy centers. And these energy centers, they have a certain kind of emotional frequency, one could say, or they are embodying a certain kind of emotional experience. So for example, your lower chakra, it starts and it also runs all along your spine. So all along your spine, you have these 6 chakras. And these 6 chakras, they are connected also very much with the body because they also are connected with the main hormones in your body, your glands that are excreting hormones. So for example, your adrenal glands, your endocrine gland, your pituitary, all these different glands, they are then interesting because the glands are also regulating your emotions. So in one sense, the body is then picking up whatever is happening within the mind. So then we see at the bottom you have your root chakra, which is responsible for fear. Fear and self-preservation. That's what's happening right at the bottom. Just how to survive. So that is the basic instinct of life that all animals share. Everyone, all of us have it. So fear is the root emotion in the material world. Then your second chakra, Swadhisthana, is the creative energy. So sex and creativity very much interlinked with one another. So that energy is there. Then above that, in your stomach, your solar plexus, your Manipura chakra, which is then regulating your will. So willpower. So that is the ability of the living being to have his own independent will, which is very much connected. Therefore it's called the solar plexus. And it's very much also connected with the energy that we get from what we eat. So that basic energy that we have. Then above that, in your chest is your Anahata chakra, which is the chakra regulating your ability to feel your emotions. So in your heart. So that is why we call the heart as the seat of the emotions. And then above that, your throat, Vishuddha chakra, which is your ability to communicate, to speak. So it's interesting that this is separate. And we see also sometimes you can feel something, but then you might not be able to express it because it's a different part of you that is regulating communication. And then above that, your Agya chakra, which is your ability for knowledge or perception, to understand what is happening. So in this way, the universe is also regulated on these same principles. So the same planetary systems, they will then be relating. Therefore, right at the bottom of the universe, you have the hellish planets, which are predominated by a great sense of fear. And as you move up, then you will see that, therefore, as we go to the higher planetary systems, therefore we see this reserved for those individuals who have properly put all their emotions, their communication, their willpower, everything into, they have subordinated it to the principles of knowledge and realization. And therefore the sages are the ones who are placed at the top, at the higher end of the universe. And that's what you see, Janas, Tapas, Satyaloka. They are embodying then, in one sense, these principles of intelligence. And therefore that is where we find them. And above them all, Satyaloka, we find the creators, or the real, the chief directors, Vishnu, Brahma and Shiva. So they're there because they're the senior people, the real senior devotees. That's where they are, Vishnu, Brahma and Shiva. And in one sense, then embodying obviously the 3 modes of nature, which is really organizing the whole show. So it is amazing how this meditation, the Virat Rupa, is very, very deep. When we read it, it just sounds like this description and okay, however, but it all fits together and it is very mystical and very magical to understand how the whole universe fits together in such a beautiful whole and how it is reflected in whatever it is that we do. And these basic principles, if we study them and think about them, they allow us to understand all kinds of various situations that we are in. All situations work on this principle. Whatever it is that we do, whatever it is that we work with, whether we're working with people, we're working with organization, we're working with even physical spaces, like you see if you're doing interior design, or whatever it is, one is able to understand that in its relationship to Krishna. And it's not just about the physical form or the structure of it, is reflecting Krishna's form, but then ultimately the devotee, he has that unique insight, which is that yes, it is ultimately meant for Krishna's pleasure. That is the highest form of realization, being able to understand things in their proper perspective, is starting with the understanding that it is all meant for Krishna's pleasure. And therefore it is that basic service attitude, that basic tendency, that is what makes the devotee so unique. And therefore even if you don't understand all this other stuff, you don't understand the chakras, and you don't understand exactly the universal form and all the planetary systems, it all goes completely over your head, that's not really important. The important thing is whether you can understand that, whether you have a service attitude, because it is that service attitude that is the conclusion of all these things. And by having that basic understanding, then you have understood everything in its proper perspective. Even though you might not know the details, but you know the real overarching truth that catches everything. Therefore the service attitude is then, as Prabhupada explains, that is the main duty of the spiritual master, is to induce the service attitude within the individual. Because somehow by this service attitude, it is possible to adjust everything, to properly understand everything, and to properly adjust to all various situations that life can throw at us, and to see the world in its proper perspective, as long as we have that basic attitude of the devotee. And therefore, it is so glorious wherever we find a person who has that kind of attitude. And the Bhagavatam is just trying to bring all kinds of various people to this point. And here specifically, Sukadeva Goswami is preaching to those yogis who are meditating on the world, who are not necessarily ready for God as a person, but still, he's trying to bring them to that point. Because as we have to remember, he is sitting in a big assembly and just starting his instructions to Parikshit. But not everybody is convinced yet that devotional service is the highest goal. So he is still preaching. He's starting now, and he has to speak to a very broad audience of people, and somehow bring everyone to the same point. So that when he starts to explain, when he tries to explain that this is the essence of what one is supposed to hear and what one is supposed to chant, that everyone is agreement. So many of these chapters are then also directed to these other yogis and other Vedantists and Gyanis and empirics who are also there in the audience, and they're also being preached to. But it is also relevant for us, because we also are a little bit like that. We are not pure devotees yet. We are also attached to thinking about the material world, and we have all our different misconceptions. So therefore, Bhagavatam is good for everyone. And in this way, it all brings us to the same point. Okay, let's hear if there are any questions, any comments on anything that has been said. Not today. Nothing today, maybe? Amazing. Practically. You like to make it practical. That's very nice. No, it's good. Prabhupada also said, Prabhupada once, he was writing a book, or having some conversations, and then he told one of his disciples, he says, yes. How does the story go? Prabhupada showed him a lot of things that he had written, just some articles and stuff that he had written, like all kinds of typewriter articles. And then the devotee was amazed how much stuff there is. It's like, wow, Prabhupada, you really go for it. You really write a lot. Because you remember when Prabhupada was first in New York, and he was every day he would be writing on his typewriter. He was just continuing, either speaking or he was writing, and he was just building up all these manuscripts. It later became the Bhagavad Gita introduction and whatever it is, but he was always writing quite a lot actually. And then he told, when his disciples saw it, he's like, wow, that's amazing. Prabhupada says, yes, and one day we will collect all these things and we will publish a book, and we will call it Practical Theology. Prabhupada says, theology but practical. What do I do? So, how to understand any situation? Well, Well, yes. Firstly, you start with the principles. In any situation, you have to understand what is your principles that do not change. The problem with the material world is it is always changing. That's what makes it difficult. So just when you figured out one situation, then the situation changes. You know, damn it, you just figured it out, and then it changes again. We see that many of our problems with people is even our relationships with people change. You figure out the person, and somehow it's going well. Somehow it's working, and your issues are... But then something happens again, and then the whole thing changes again. So therefore, that's the problem with the material world, always changing. So therefore, always have to think about it. Oh my God, you cannot just set things up like we see here in the temple. People come, you make a whole system, everybody has their place, and then people go. And God, you have to start all over again. Then, your temple commander leaves, and then, and then again, you have to fit in. So that's the problem with the material world. It's always moving. Because there's so much change, therefore it's difficult to understand things. And then emotionally it also becomes tiresome, because your emotions are indicators. They indicate to you what is happening in a situation. So then you have to deal with it. Therefore, when something is wrong, you experience fear, and that fear forces you to deal with the situation, or whatever it is. But the problem with the conditioned soul is that his emotions, that is the problem with illusion, is that illusion means that your emotions are not actually corresponding to what is the reality. And therefore that causes many, many problems. So the world already is complicated, but then your reaction to the world is not even accurate. And then you're in trouble. So for example, nowadays you have people that have severe stress, severe anxiety. But the interesting thing with most people is that a lot of their anxiety is because they're thinking about the future. They're projecting themselves into the future and thinking what will happen. And then they create all these scenarios of what will happen. And then they experience so much fear because they're thinking about the future. But the thing is, what they're thinking about probably won't even happen. So they're having a whole emotional experience, so much stress and fear about something that will not even happen, because it's not happening now. Amazing, isn't it? Or you have people that even lust, a lot of lust. Lust works. Prabhupada said this thing with karma. It says karma means it is desire that cannot be satisfied. That's what lust is. So desire is not a problem, but lust is a specific form of desire. And why is it that it cannot be satisfied? Because you are thinking, when you go for something, when you have lust, you are thinking it will be a certain way, and therefore you go for it. But it won't actually be like that. And if you knew how it would be like, then you wouldn't experience lust. You wouldn't actually want to go for that situation. That's how it goes. Therefore you see how sometimes you look at some food and it looks very tasty, and then you're like, whoa, this is... And you experience so much lust for this experience. But then you go for it, and you experience the after effects, whatever. And then you're like, oh God, why did I do this? This is ridiculous. Huh? So, and then Prabhupada says, one of the results of practicing devotional service, of experiencing Krishna's mercy, is that what you have is, you see the naked form of material desire. And then you become freed from lust. When you actually see, when you look at it, and you know what will actually happen if you go for that situation. So the point we're just trying to make is that it is complicated to see things in the proper perspective, because the world is always changing, so that's the one problem. And the first thing is that we ourselves are not able to see things, and that we ourselves are not accurately responding even to the world. And we create many problems for ourselves that even aren't there. So the first thing we do is we have to always go back to certain principles. Principles that don't change. That's the first thing, which is very nice. That's why Krishna consciousness is so nice. Because the one thing is that many things change, but in Krishna consciousness we learn about things that never change. Like Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Very nice. It will never change. Nothing happens. Nothing actually can change it. Not even anything you do can change it, which is also wonderful. And then there's many things like that. Things that never change. What else is there that never changes? Things you know, principles that you know that never changes. Nothing can do, nothing can alter it. Can you give us another example? No, you must be able to give me an example. Nothing. What else? Jagadatri? Tell it to Divyangi, maybe she can translate. Yeah. Well, what else? What other things? Like, for example, come on, it's a very basic one, the basis of our philosophy. Yes, the holy name. Exactly. It never changes. It's always there. It's like it never goes anywhere. Its potency is never changed. It's just completely there. What else is there? Another truth that we know in any situation. That we are spirit soul, yeah. And what does it mean that we are spirit soul? What does it mean specifically? We're not the body, yeah. That also never changes. What else? What is the soul? What does the soul do? What is the function of the soul? What is the purpose of the soul? Okay, but what is the soul? Krishnera, what's it, you know? Nitya, Krishnera Nitya Dāsa, the eternal servant of Krishna. So that never changes, never changes. So in this way, that's the first part, the first step, is to understand what are the things that don't change. So therefore, even when we deal with other people, therefore, what's the first thing? To understand that this person is a servant of Krishna. Maybe they don't know it now, but that's what they are. That's what will make them happy. So in this way, that is how we start. We always have to go back to these fundamental things. Right? So these things, they look very simple, and we sometimes think, oh, I know them, but you don't. Therefore, you again become confused, because you forget these essential things, and you start dealing with people and situations, but it's not in harmony with these essential things. You start dealing with another person, not as if you are the servant, and therefore all these complications arise in the relationship. You start dealing as a person not able to see them as connected to Krishna, and therefore complications arise. So therefore, we always return back to these essential things that we know are true. And then slowly what happens is we ourselves become transformed. And then that is how we start to see things in their proper perspective. So that's one important way in terms of practical theology, as Prabhupada said. So it's theology, but it's very practical, because it changes how you deal with certain situations. But the most difficult part of it, and that we will see, is that it is we ourselves, we must be willing to change. That is the real mystery of the universe. That is the real secret to somehow finding peace within the world, because the world will always be changing. But to understand that the world, whatever we are experiencing, to see that it is Krishna that is trying to tell me something. That is how the devotee experiences. We see that Lord Brahma, it's that famous verse, 10:8-14. You know it? You must know it. Lord Brahma's prayers, where he says, Tatenu kampam susamikshemana. Yeah, so can you translate it for us? Yeah, more or less. And seeing it specifically, as difficulties come, he continues offering his obeisances, seeing these difficulties as what? As the mercy of Krishna. Yeah, very amazing. So it means that it is that is the root of it. So somehow you have to connect with that root orientation to see that at the root, this is somehow Krishna is trying to do what? Trying to change me. Krishna is trying to change me. And the more we are willing to change according to what Krishna wants us to become, then it becomes powerful. So in the beginning, we see in devotional service that the focus is on doing things. You know, just very practical. That's why it's very nice. In the beginning, it's simple. I remember the first time I went to the temple, I stayed. It was very uncomfortable because I didn't really know how the whole thing works. But somehow I went, and then they opened this door. There was this one brahmachari who was sort of giving me my service, and it was ISKCON Cape Town was sort of like, it's just like a little version of ISKCON Brooklyn. It's more or less the same thing, but just smaller building. And they opened this one door. They opened this one door, and the whole room was just full of junk. The whole thing was just full of junk, all kinds of junk. The debris of, generations of devotees who have come and gone, and who have left. The only thing that is left to remind us of them their junk in that room. So then he said, your service today is you have to clean out this thing and organize it. And immediately, wow, so practical. Then I became so comfortable with that's what I do. I carry stuff around and I go in there, clean it up and put it out and knock it out and clean it, and it was very nice. So immediately then I felt comfortable in devotional service, because at that moment the philosophy boiled down to me is doing something. You know? And then the first time they left me, they sent me out on books. It was also practical, even though it was traumatic, I have to tell you that. First time I did books, I just heard they were speaking about the marathon coming up. I didn't know what the marathon is. I thought there was some marathon we're going to run or something. So they were just speaking, the marathon is starting tomorrow. And then I just heard, okay, now we're going to distribute books. So then they just drop us off. There was not like a monthly Sankirtan festival or like a session of how to do it before. It was just like, okay, we're going to drop you off and we pick you up again in 4 hours. And they just drop you off somewhere in the middle of Cape Town. Boom. We have a book bag and a hat, and then they just throw you out of the car, and then you just have to sell books. And no one tells you how to do it or whatever. Oh, it was difficult. But still, at the same time, at that point, I understood that now my Krishna consciousness is dependent on doing something, isn't it? So in the beginning, a lot of our Krishna consciousness is about doing. The whole process of deity worship is about doing. So you're the servant of Krishna, but therefore you have to do it. And this is very important, and it stays part of us, a big part of our life. In the beginning, we have so many things that we do. You know? So architectural plans, whatever it is, understanding that I'm doing this for Krishna. So at that point, the theology is practical in that sense. But then as we start to perform these things, what happens is then we reach a certain point where we also stop doing other things. That's the other part. We don't do anything else anymore. It's not really related to Krishna. Very nice. If we come to that point, very wonderful, and you are very fortunate if you can do that. And if you come there, try to stay there. Don't go back. Don't go back again to starting to do other things that are not related to Krishna. That happens. You know, people get onto a certain platform, but then they again go back from that platform. But once you do that, once everything you are doing is somehow connected to Krishna, then you see that the next stage starts, which is then, it's not about doing something for Krishna, but it is about becoming something for Krishna. Then it doesn't matter so much what you're doing, but what matters is who you are, what you are. And that is a little more difficult. Because doing something is sort of easy, especially if you are good at it already. Like even before Krishna consciousness, I was good at throwing stuff away and organizing things and cleaning stuff up. I had a lot of energy. So therefore, when they asked me that day to clean up that room, I loved it. And it was very easy because I could do it. But then at a certain point, when Krishna starts to ask you to become something, and it might not necessarily be who you were before, that becomes a little more challenging. And the spiritual master actually wants us to become something that we are not yet. So that is the mysterious nature of transformation that takes place in devotional service. And that can be a little tricky. But that is also actually very practical. It is actually quite practical. It's not easy, but it is practical. We see Krishna, for example, in many verses in the Bhagavad Gita, he explains the qualities that he likes clearly. I mean, people are always mental. What can I do to get Krishna's mercy? Oh, Krishna, I'm so confused. What are you confused about? And Krishna clearly explains in so many verses who he likes. Who are the people that he likes? Very clearly. There's no confusion about it. He clearly explains that he likes those people who do not disturb others and who are not disturbed by others. He says it clearly. He says that if you're not disturbed by other people when they are doing whatever they are doing because of the modes of nature that are influencing them, he is impressed by that. He actually likes that. He likes it if his devotees become like that. He says it clearly. He says that he likes those devotees that are self-controlled, a little disciplined. By discipline we can also conquer Krishna. If we become a little more attentive to what we do, like nowadays we see, for example, what is causing major havoc in people's spiritual life, massive disruption, it should be, instead of the coronavirus, they should put this all over. It's like massive pandemic, epidemic, that is destroying everyone's life. And that is the sulfur, completely destroying people's ability to stay concentrated. How many people can chant 16 rounds without looking at their cell phone? Very few actually nowadays. He was addicted to their phone. But Krishna is impressed, he says it clearly. If you say out of discipline, I will now force myself to focus, and I will not let myself be distracted because I am now doing something for Krishna. He clearly says that he appreciates that and he likes it, and you will get his mercy if you do it. So in this way we have to see that actually all the descriptions that Krishna was giving in the Bhagavad Gita is practical. And then you have some of these people, God, it's amazing. Krishna clearly explains in so many parts of the Bhagavatam, for example, how if you manifest forgiveness, you will obtain my mercy. It is so amazing. It has nothing to do with the other person or what the other person has done to you. It is simply the understanding that if I am forgiving, Krishna will be merciful unto me. Then he will also forgive me. You see? It's not mysterious. But then still we see so many people, so much hate, my God, so much hate and anger and disrespect and the desire for some kind of revenge or punishment that they want to inflict on others because they think other people are the source of my unhappiness. And therefore these people cannot experience Krishna's mercy because he clearly explains that that is not how you impress me. It is like a stench that is amongst the living being because he is somehow always in this critical attitude, always finding fault. I mean, it is so, how much more clearly can it be explained? How much more practical can it be? But we think it is not practical because we don't want to do it. Therefore it is not practical. So Krishna consciousness is always very practical. And one has to be, it is when we actually read regularly and we become confronted with these realities that is described in the Bhagavatam. And we practically see all the various people and how they obtain Krishna's mercy. We see in the Bhagavatam so many parts where people have obtained Krishna's direct darshan. But you see, it is not just Krishna that appears manifest. He just appears one day. You're just there going about your day, and then one day Krishna jumps out of your cupboard and he says, Hari Bol, and then he speaks to you. No, you will see these devotees who have undergone some challenge. So different qualities. We see Dhruva, for example, he obtained Krishna's mercy out of his great determination. He was so determined to see Krishna. And therefore Narada Muni said, this boy must be directed towards transcendence. And then he gave him his meditation. We see Bali Maharaj, who was a demon king. He was a demon. He was not a devotee. But because he was Prahlad Maharaj's grandson, therefore he obtained the mercy of Krishna. But at the same time, why did he get Krishna's mercy? Because when he made his promise to Vamana that they will give him, even then when he knew that when his spiritual master, Shukracharya, told him that this boy will take everything, still Bali did not want to break his promise, and he still gave it because he knew that this is better. Therefore also he obtained Krishna's mercy. We see Prahlad Maharaj obtained the protection of Nrsimhadev. Why? Because of his deep faith that the Lord will protect him. Therefore he was not afraid, because he knew that Krishna will protect me, so why am I so afraid? But therefore he conquered Krishna's heart. We see in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, we see when Krishna was speaking with Rukmini. Krishna at that point, he had brought down the Parijata flower for Satyabhama. And then what happened is that Rukmini didn't say anything. Krishna once gave Rukmini a Parijata flower. Then Satyabhama saw that, and she was so upset. And then Krishna had to bring down a whole Parijata tree, simply to satisfy Satyabhama. And then Rukmini didn't say anything. She wasn't at all disturbed by the fact that Krishna had now given so much more to Satyabhama. So then Krishna made a plan that he wanted to disturb her. He wanted to see if he can make her angry, somehow or other, get her to be disturbed. My God, she's just so submissive, so undemanding. So then he made this whole arrangement. And then he told her once, there's that famous pastime where he was trying to tell her that actually she married the wrong person. He told her that, really, if you think about it, you made a mistake. You should have married, what's his name? The demon that Krishna later killed, who wanted to marry her. And he told her that really, I'm not even that interested in family life. Really, people don't even know what my caste is. And you will see that everybody who associates with me, they all end up in distress. Wherever I go, I just cause chaos. The gopis completely broke their hearts. Whoever else I associate with, the moment you become a devotee, in general, actually, you'll see that your life becomes more complicated in one sense. Because you do these things that people don't understand. Why aren't you just working and getting a job and being normal? So no, the devotees, they somehow put themselves in these strange positions. But then we see that when Krishna said this, Rukmini was so shocked that she just fainted and she didn't become angry. She couldn't understand what Krishna was saying. So it was just the thought of somehow Krishna leaving her. It was just too much. She fell over. So then Krishna understood that he had gone too far, and she didn't understand the joke because she didn't take it in the way that he expected. And then there's this nice line where Krishna tells her, he says, actually Rukmini, you have conquered me by your silence. Isn't that amazing? Because you have undergone all these things and you have never complained, and you've always taken it simply as understanding that it doesn't matter. Whatever you want, that will happen, and I'm fine with that. By your silence, actually, you have conquered my heart. So what an amazing thing, isn't it? To think that even if we just shut up sometimes, we can actually obtain Krishna's mercy. But it's not complaining about so many unnecessary things. So in this way, it is actually very practical if we look at it. And but it is all rooted in one thing, a very simple principle, that ultimately everything is made for Krishna's pleasure. So the world is made for Krishna's pleasure, and I am made for Krishna's pleasure. My reaction to the world, my desires, my thoughts, my personality should actually start to be changed according to what exactly it is that Krishna wants. And in the beginning it is about what we do, but then it becomes who we are. And it is at that point actually that Krishna consciousness becomes more exciting, because the real experience of Krishna happens within the heart, in the internal world. And that is only accessible once an individual starts to change what is happening in the heart. It is easy to say, and one can sit here and speak about it, but we know it's not so easy to do. But at the same time, we should not be afraid. Why not? Because we also know one other thing. There's one other important thing, very important principle, something that also doesn't change, and that is that Krishna is very merciful. He's very merciful. So even if we fall short, it is not a problem. It's never an issue. Because we have faith. We want to become what Krishna wants us to become, but we also know that Krishna is merciful, Krishna is forgiving, and Krishna is also very patient. So in that way, by simply remembering all the things that never changes, we become able to see things in a proper perspective more and more. And speaking about proper perspective, it is now time to take breakfast. So Grantaraj Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande.